Hi guys, I really enjoyed making this. These aren't your run-of-the-mill, I saw a mannequin and it moved kind of stories. I've scoured the net to find you some disturbing new ones. There's human horror, there's the plain bizarre, and there is the unexplainable. Hope you enjoy, and let me know if you like this sort of thing, because I can easily do more stories like this, or even some dull stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. This happened quite recently. I was driving home alone, and I was out in the sticks. Actually, it was a mountain pass. I was high up. I remember that right enough. It had been a late night, and it was already past midnight as I was making my way home. I was speeding, I'll admit it. I wanted to get home as soon as possible. There were no cars on the road, no one was around, it was fine. Well, at least, that was what I thought at the time. Then, something unexpected happened. As I sped around a corner, I saw a woman in red stood in the road. I was about to collide with her, but somehow I managed to swerve and miss her. My heart was beating out of my chest. I couldn't believe how close of a call that was. Due to the speed I was going, I almost spun out. It was horrible. I put my car in reverse and spun around to get in the right lane for a start, and then to take a look to see if the woman was alright. I looked in the direction I saw her, and I saw that she was laying on the ground. I felt my heart drop. If I saw myself in a mirror, I know I would have been as white as a ghost. So I got out of the car after pulling it onto the hard shoulder, and I raced over to her. I looked down and I saw a mannequin lying there in the road. It was the type of mannequin you might see in an old clothing store. What I'm trying to say is that it looked out of date and definitely out of place. I was incredibly relieved that I wasn't going to be in trouble for murder, or at the very least, manslaughter. Once relief had settled in, anger came as fast as I drove that night. I was very annoyed that someone would do that. I mean, they intentionally placed that thing in the road, just beyond the bend of the curve. They knew that they would cause distress to drivers approaching. I picked up the mannequin, and I threw it to the side of the road. I may have even kicked the thing out of anger, I can't remember. I started back to my car, and then something dawned on me. I needed some sort of reassurance because I couldn't just leave the scene without knowing what the hell just happened and why. I will be honest, I did start to believe that it could be a person rather than a mannequin for a second there. I kept asking myself why to all the questions I couldn't answer, and the number one question that I couldn't answer was, why was there a mannequin out here in the middle of nowhere? I was just too curious. I could hear myself explaining this story to my friends and not having a good enough ending for them, not having any form of answer to the same questions they would ask me. I turned back to get another look at the mannequin. Why was it wearing red and lying in the road? I took a closer look. I'm not ashamed to say this, but it's a little weird. I pulled down the mannequin's clothes, and I'm glad I did because I found something. I guess you could call it a clue, as there was something written on her back. There was a name, a birth date, a profession, and a town name written there. I don't want to say what that was because it might be referencing a real person. It gets a bit heavy from here on out, so fair warning if you're easily triggered. The message written on the back of the mannequin went on to say that the woman that they had referred to in the message was a victim of a violent sexual assault, and due to the trauma she suffered at the hands of her attacker, she decided to end her life the following day, presumably right where I was. I looked out towards the darkness, over the guardrail. The dark drop was all I could see below. The message went on to say that the attacker would never be forgiven. I would never forgive them, was written again and again and again until the point that the pen ran out of ink. I'm assuming that whoever wrote that message was either a family member or that woman's partner. I was filled with a profound sense of sadness and an overwhelming sense of horror. I don't know if it was a prank or something, but it felt real. I didn't want to be there anymore. It was at this point I noticed that there was another car parked up, just out of sight. I don't know if that car was abandoned, heaven forbid. It belonged to that woman, and it hadn't been towed yet. Or if it belonged to the person who positioned the mannequin out there. I think the latter, but I don't know why, but I get the sense that I was being watched. I didn't drive on that mountain pass again for about a year. It really freaked me out. When I did pass through again though, I did not see the mannequin. This is a memory from my youth that came back to me recently. It's a strange one because for me, until very recently, it wasn't a horrific memory. I didn't understand at the time, but now I think I do, and it doesn't sit well with me. You'll see why. When I was in elementary school, I used to walk to and from school along this rural countryside road. There were rice fields either side of the road, and it would get dark and cold in the winter. Along this road was an abandoned factory, a factory that produced mannequins. And at the end of the road was a sweet shop. There were a few houses scattered around the vicinity of the rice fields too. That factory had been abandoned for years, and I don't ever remember seeing people working there. The factory was closed off to the public, but you could see in there from a certain corner as you walked past it. Through the wire mesh you could see dismembered mannequins all in a pile. It was interesting, yet quite eerie. There was guttering surrounding the factory, and there must have been some blockage or something because it smelled really, really bad. There was sludge dripping down the sides of the building, and I think that some people were fly tipping there, just dumping their garbage there. One day, for some reason, I decided to take a detour from my usual route. I walked to the back of the factory. I guess I was feeling curious that day. Round the back smelled even worse. It was horrible. But then I found a female mannequin, half in a pile of trash and half exposed. The mannequin looked in real good condition. Its skin was white, like a crane. I thought that I would get a good scare or a laugh out of my friends if I pulled the mannequin out of there and brought it to one of our hangouts, but I had to give up because A, it was heavier than I thought, and B, the stench was incredibly overpowering in there. I didn't want to tell my friends about the mannequin in case one of them got the same idea as me. I kept it a secret. For a while back then, I would go and look at the mannequin after school and make sure it was still there. Sadly, day after day her appearance went downhill. Her white skin became dull and dirty. It decayed and looked rotten after time. Its appearance and colour changed, and eventually its hair fell out. I even saw bite marks on the thing. It was like it had been gnawed by a mouse or some insect. It got kinda hard to look at, so I stopped going to the factory so regularly after a while. The last time I saw it, it was almost fully submerged in the sludge that surrounded it. It looked bloated in areas, like it had absorbed the gross water around it. I hated it. I can't remember how much time passed, but I went back there after a while to go see the mannequin again. I don't know why I did it. I went around the back of the factory just like always, but she wasn't there anymore. Shortly after that, I graduated from elementary school, and when I started at high school, I took a different route to my new school. Fast forward to the third year of senior high school during the summer holidays, and I remembered the factory. I took my bike out and I wanted to ride out there. When I arrived, I realized that the whole area had changed. The rice fields were all gone and there were rows of houses in their place. The factory was now a car park. I remembered the mannequin and I felt something deep reawaken inside of me, emotionally. Then suddenly, a chilling, frightening realization crept up on me. Do plastic mannequins decay and rot that quickly? I heard my internal voice ask. What I had seen at a young age was nothing short of the grotesque. I knew right then and there that it was no mannequin, and I couldn't shake off that thought. Mannequins don't decompose, so it must have been something that looked like a mannequin, and I think that all those years ago, I had been looking at a human. I don't know the truth. Even though the factory is long gone, the smell and the memories remain. What once was a fond childhood memory of my first independent steps and taste of adventure has now been tainted, and has now become something abominable. I never told any of my friends or family about that experience. This isn't my story, but one of my acquaintances. I'll keep his name anonymous, so I think it's fine to share this. Let's just call him Mr. H. Well, Mr. H used to work at my company. He retired a while back though. It was mutual. I think he would have worked longer if he could, but he couldn't. Plus his health wasn't in the best condition. He was never the type to sit around doing nothing. He began to really care about his health, so he sought the advice of a doctor. The doctor recommended him going for regular walks, so he decided to go walk around his neighborhood each night. Mr. H lives in a quiet, hilly suburban area. People kind of kept themselves to themselves out there, he said. He also admits that he barely knows his neighbors. Since he had always been so preoccupied with work, he felt a little guilty that he hadn't taken the chance to meet his neighbors or look around the area he lived in. So he took it upon himself to say hello to the people he passed and to explore the neighborhood. One evening, he was doing his usual walk. He found out on Google Maps that there was a shrine not too far away from his home, so he thought it'd be cool to go take a look at that. When he got there, he looked around and found that there was a forest at the back of the shrine. There was a dense amount of trees, but light shone through them. He said it looked lovely. The sounds of nature were in full chorus. The croak of frogs, tweets of birds, and the trill of hidden insects resounded around the shrine. He walked further into the forest area. The temperature was cool in there. It was just the perfect place. He said that if he knew about the shrine, he would have come a lot sooner. He regretted that he was just finding it now. So he went further in, through the trees, until he arrived at something that made him open his eyes wide. There was a body of deep green water there. It was a really big pond. The trees and bushes grew thick around the pond that they seemed to keep it hidden from the outside world. The pond was filled with aquatic plants, and it looked like there could be fish in there. He walked around the pond thinking that it would be a great place to drop a rod in. He didn't even fish, but he said he would like to there. He said that a dragonfly flew into his field of vision and hovered right before his eyes. He watched it for a moment, and then he heard a splash. He turned to face the pond, and he saw a huge ripple was spreading on the surface of the water, about 4 or 5 meters or 15 foot from the shore. He thought that a fish had leapt out of the water. He stared at the rippling water, and then something surfaced. Mr. H looked at it, puzzled, trying to figure out what the hell it was. He thought it was a ball at first. It looked like a grey football, or soccer ball. It looked old and shabby. He guessed that some kids nearby had accidentally kicked their ball into the pond. Then some bubbles below rose, and the ball-shaped object span slowly in the water. The ball looked weird. It was like it had these bloodshot-stained eyes, and there were definite points which looked like dark reddish eyes. There was a dreadful fishy smell that accompanied the sight of that thing. The moment those eyes looked at him, he heard a chorus of cicadas begin to chirp. It was so loud, it caused him to look towards the trees and take his eyes off the pond. When he turned back, he saw the green water was rippling again, and the ball was closer, and it was no ball with eyes drawn on it. It was a mannequin's head, and it was staring right at him. It had all its hair cut off. Well, he said it was like a mannequin's head. He looked away for a second, and it was gone. All he could see was the rippling green pond water. He wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, so he turned on his heels and headed back the way he came. He knew that a mannequin surely shouldn't be in that pond. There was no reason why it should be there. Much less any reason as to why it seemed to be able to rise out of the water on its own volition. Mr. H still goes on his nightly walks, but he said he'll never go back there again. A long time ago, I read a story similar to my own experience on the internet. It's so frustrating that I cannot find it these days, as I would love to ask the OP some questions. It was this story about a bunch of mannequins out in the middle of nowhere. They were arranged to look like a family, and it was such a creepy story. Hi guys, let me cut in and just say that I found the story this person couldn't. It's one I've actually done before, but it's a good one. It will be the next story after this one. So now back to the story. My family lives in the countryside, and the mountains are all around us. It's pretty nice. Sometimes we would go into the woods and pick wild vegetables. My grandpa taught me how to forage and where to find vegetables and mushrooms when I was in elementary school. By the time I was in junior high school, I went alone, or with friends, on trips into the forest. It was a Sunday, and me and 2 friends had arranged to go into the woods for foraging. I don't know why we all loved to do it. Maybe it was because it made us feel mature or something. I don't know. Things went well to begin with, but when we grew tired and decided to head home, things went downhill. We were walking down the narrow dirt path we had used to enter the forest, and my friend screamed. Well, it wasn't uncommon to cut your legs on a branch or have a bug fly at you or land on you. That's what I thought happened at first. I looked over to him, and he wasn't rubbing a wound or swatting away a bug. He was stood completely still, and he was staring upwards. My other friend was staring in the same direction too. I looked at what they were looking at. There were 2 bodies hanging from a tree branch. They were hung by their necks, and their body was stock still. I had never seen anything that frightening. It was positively traumatizing. It looked to be a man and a woman. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. I instinctively began to back away as panic began to settle in. I couldn't look away though. Once I had taken a couple of steps back, I realized that they weren't just the bodies of humans. They were the bodies of mannequins. It must have been a prank. What a cruel prank to pull, I thought. We were all so annoyed at the prank. We were complaining about it as we walked back down the mountain path. I explained what happened to my dad when I got home, and he said he would go up there. I wanted to go with him and help him. We took a stepladder, some pruning scissors, and a hatchet. My friend said that they would come too. When we got there, he set up the stepladder, and we helped keep it steady as he climbed it. He then cut the rope from around the male mannequin's neck, and it fell to the ground. We were going to take it back to the barn and get rid of it. If we left it out there, then maybe it could be used again in another prank, and my dad didn't want us boys to be spooked out by it. It had clearly affected my friends and I. My dad said that he wanted to smash the thing up and throw it away in bin bags. He took the clothes off the thing to separate them, and that was when we noticed that there was something written on the mannequin's chest and stomach. "Whoever takes this mannequin down will die," was written in bright red letters. We all stood there, as still as those mannequins were hanging from the tree. It was really creepy. My dad clearly wanted to get rid of these mannequins as fast as he could, so he got straight back onto the stepladder without saying a word. He cut the female mannequin's noose, and it dropped to the ground with a dull thud. It was wearing a flowery one-piece dress. We could already see the red writing peeking over the top of her dress. "Whoever takes this mannequin down, the person you love the most in life, will die." My dad stood there, silent again. We didn't know what to do, but then my dad spoke and his words cut through the strange atmosphere those hanging mannequins had created. "Here, boys, go get yourself a drink from the store." And with that, he handed us some money. He didn't usually do things like this. He was a bit tight with his cash. That's how I knew he was worried. He took the mannequins to the barn and smashed them up with an axe and disposed of them. My dad and my friends don't really like to talk about what happened that day. It's become a taboo subject. The most painful memory from that day is the constant reminder of what was written on the female mannequin's stomach. The person you love the most in life will die. I've been worried about my mum, myself, you know. Who could it be? I'm also worried about my dad. If such a curse exists, I mean, it may have been just a prank, but it was pretty traumatizing. My hobby is mountain hiking. The kinds of mountains I like to hike are the ones with no roads, no other people, and where wild vegetables grow. Off the beaten track hiking. Sometimes on these hikes I come across strange or unusual things. For example, I once saw an albino antelope, and on another occasion I saw an eagle the size of a grown man. However, the weirdest incident was the time I came across a family impossibly far into the mountains. It was a weekday afternoon and I was hiking along the prefectural border between Miyagi, Yamagata, and Akita. There was a forest full of huge beech trees, which made it quite easy to walk as it got dark. This is a place that not an everyday person would hike. Only local people to this mountain range would probably know about it, or people like me who enjoy hiking and have GPS. It was secluded. I was walking along a small ridge and I noticed a small stream flowing below. At the edge of the stream, I saw a man standing there. I first thought, he must be doing a spot of fishing. But then I noticed that he wasn't alone. 4 other people stood with him, and they were all standing in the river. I couldn't see clearly because they must have been about 100 meters away, but I was sure that there were 4 people stood in the river. 2 appeared to be children. I don't know why, but I thought that they were on the verge of committing a family suicide. I mean, to come all the way out here to this secluded mountain river alone, so close to dark. If that was the case, I planned to intervene and to try to talk them out of it. I hoped that wasn't the case, of course, but either way, I was interested in finding out what was going on, so I used my binoculars and I took a closer look. Just as I thought, there were 4 people facing away from me, 2 children, 2 adults. I watched for a moment, waiting for them to turn my way so I could catch a glimpse of their faces, but they didn't move at all. I must have been watching them for 5 minutes and yet they didn't move. It dawned on me. They're mannequins. Someone must have put them there as a prank or as a trap. I decided to go in for a closer look, since my first thought was to check in on the family anyway. I quietly crept closer. I didn't want to be noticed. In my mind I was planning my escape route. Jumping in the river itself crossed my mind if something terrible was to happen. As I drew closer, my predictions came true. There were 4 mannequins before me, 2 adults, 2 children, all dressed up, out here in the middle of nowhere. I was disgusted. My body shivered. I couldn't think of logically why they were here. I thought to myself, someone did this, and they must be absolutely not right in the head. I was close enough now that I could see the details on each mannequin. Each one had a name printed on its front. Each mannequin was peppered with small holes, bullet holes, like a shotgun bullet trail. The piece de resistance was a broken box cutter blade sticking out of one of the child mannequins' backs. That was enough for me. I was terrified. I began to make my way back down the mountain. Even as I write this now, I'm shivering. Those creepy mannequin dolls with marks all up and down them. Someone carried them out there to do whatever they did to them. But why? These were not light mannequins. These were the bulky, heavy wooden ones. If I had to carry them myself, I would have to stop for a while to take a rest. And that's just talking about one. There were 4 of them out there. It would take forever to carry them. Well, this all happened about 2 years ago. I guess they're still there.